My family stole my late mother's belongings while I was grieving and told me I was being selfish until I did something they never expected. My mom died, and somehow the first thing my family did was treat her house like a free-for-all. And when I finally noticed what was missing, they looked me straight in the face and told me I was being selfish. I am in Duluth, Minnesota. My mom Alina lived 10 minutes from me in this small, creaky place she loved because it had a sunroom that caught afternoon light, and she filled it with plants that always looked half mad at her, like they were surviving out of spite. She was the kind of person who kept rubber bands in a jar and gift bags folded in a drawer, and she could tell you exactly where anything was without even standing up. When she passed, it was not sudden like an accident, but it was still fast enough that my brain has been stuck in this fog where you can do basic tasks, pick up paperwork, answer calls, feed yourself, but it feels like someone turned the sound down on your whole life. The worst part was the first time I walked into her house after, because everything was exactly the same. Her shoes by the door, her reading glasses on the arm of the couch, her throw blanket bunched up the way she always left it, and it hit me so hard that the space could look normal while she was gone, like the house did not even notice. I am her only child. My dad died when I was little. My mom remarried when I was in high school to a guy named Galen, and they were together a long time, but it was always complicated. Galen was the sort of person who did not start fights. He just made himself the center of every decision by acting confused until someone else gave in. My mom had a will. She told me that years ago. She also told me she had gotten tired of people asking for things when she was still alive. And she said if someone wants something from me after I am gone, they can say it to your face, not mine. She said it half joking, but now that I have lived through my family since she died, it does not feel like a joke at all. The day after the funeral, my Aunt Roxanne called. She is my mom's older sister. She lives 2 hours away. She has a voice like she is always mid-complaint, and she said she and Galen were going to start clearing things out because the house has to be handled. And she said I could come by if I wanted, but I should not stress myself, like I was a guest in my own mom's life. I told her no, I am coming. I did not say it nicely. I did not say it rudely either. I just said it like a fact, because I am the executor. My mom made that clear, and I had the paperwork in my hand, still folded like it might crumble if I looked at it too hard. When I got there, their cars were already in the driveway, and the front door was unlocked, which made my stomach tighten, because my mom never left it unlocked, not even to run across the street, and I walked in and heard the sound of boxes being taped, like they were packing for a move. Roxanne was in the living room holding a stack of photo albums, and Galen was near the hall closet pulling out coats, and my cousin Tessa was at the dining table sorting silverware into piles, and the three of them looked up like I had interrupted something. Roxanne did that wide smile thing and said, "There you are, honey. We are taking care of the hard part so you do not have to." And I looked around and noticed that a lot of my mom's small things were already gone from where they usually sat. The bowls she kept keys in, the little ceramic bird by the window, the framed picture of me as a kid in a too big winter hat. I asked where the things from the entry table were. Roxanne said we are organizing, and I asked where the jewelry box was, because my mom kept it in the top drawer of her dresser, and I could picture it so clearly that it felt like an object sitting behind my eyes. Galen said, "What jewelry box?" like he had never heard the phrase in his life, and I walked past him down the hall and into my mom's bedroom, and the dresser drawers were open, and my mom's clothes were pulled out in clumps like someone had been searching, and the drawer where the jewelry box should have been was empty except for a few loose earring backs. I felt that weird buzzing in my arms, the one you get right before your body decides to do something without you, and I asked again, louder, "Where is it?" Roxanne came to the doorway and said, "Drew, breathe. It is just stuff." And she said it like I was being dramatic about pillows, and I asked her if she took it, and she got offended immediately, like my question was the real crime. She said, "How dare you?" And then she said we were just trying to protect valuables, and she said you are not thinking straight right now, and she said you can barely get through a sentence without looking like you might cry. So yes, we removed a few important items for safekeeping. Safekeeping, like I am the hazard, like I am the risk to my mom's belongings, not the people standing in her bedroom with her drawers turned inside out. I told her to put it back, and she said that is not how this works, and she said Galen is her husband, and she said he has rights, and she said I cannot just storm in and make demands. I reminded her I am the executor, and Roxanne waved her hand like that word was a hobby, and she said paperwork can be challenged, and she said you should be grateful we are here, and she said the house would be a disaster if it was left to you in your emotional state. That line hit so hard because it was so cold. My mom died, and their angle was that my grief made me unfit to handle her things. I went into the sunroom to get air, and I noticed more missing. The plant mister my mom used, the little painted stool she used as a stand, and I realized this was not them tidying. This was them selecting, and I walked back in and told them all to stop packing anything until we had an inventory. Tessa looked up from the silverware and said inventory like you are running a store, and she laughed a little, not mean exactly, more like she thought I was ridiculous. Then she said Aunt Alina would want us to have things too. She loved us, and I told her loving you does not mean you get first grab at her house. Roxanne stepped closer and said you are being selfish, and she said it softly like she was trying to help me understand, and she said grief makes people clingy, and she said you cannot keep everything, and she said do not turn this into an ugly situation. Ugly situation, as if it was not already ugly, as if they were not already in my mom's bedroom pulling things out. I asked where the jewelry box was again, and this time Galen said he put it somewhere safe, and I asked where, and he said he does not remember, and I knew that was a lie because Galen remembers every place he puts something if it benefits him. I told him then he can go get it, because I am changing the locks and no one is taking anything out of this house without documentation, and he did this slow blink and said you cannot change locks on my house. My house, he said, like my mom was a tenant in her own life, like her name was not the one on every piece of mail that still sat on the counter. I asked Roxanne if she had taken any of my mom's personal papers, and she said only the important ones, and I asked which ones, and she said do not interrogate me, and she said you are spiraling. I went into the kitchen and opened the drawer where my mom kept her small notebook, the one she used for grocery reminders and phone numbers, except I did not open it for groceries. I opened it because my mom had this habit of writing down what she loaned to people, not because she was petty, but because she liked knowing where her things went. The notebook was not there. At that point, I stopped arguing and started looking, because I realized they were not going to admit anything unless they had to, and I walked through the house room by room, and it felt horrible, like I was inspecting my mom's life like a stranger. But I needed to know what had already walked out the door. Her hall closet was missing her winter boots, her sewing room had empty shelves, and the little wooden box she kept postcards in was gone, and the more I saw the more my brain did this frantic scramble. Like if I can name every missing thing, then I can make sense of the situation, and then I will not feel like I am drowning. I went back to the dining room and asked Tessa where she put the photo albums, because now I could not see them, and she said they were in her car so they would not get damaged, like she was transporting museum pieces, and Roxanne nodded like that was totally reasonable. I told her to bring them back inside, and Roxanne said no, and she said I do not trust you not to have a breakdown and ruin them, and I stared at her because she was talking about me like I was a loose animal. And my cousin looked uncomfortable, but did not say anything. Then Roxanne did something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. She put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, Drew, your mom is gone. Stop acting like you are the only one who lost her. And she said we are family and family shares, and she said you can have some things, but you cannot hoard her whole life. I shrugged her hand off. I told them everyone needed to leave for the day, and Roxanne said, who do you think you are? And Galen just watched me like he was studying how far he could push me. I called my neighbor across the street, not to vent, but because she had a locksmith number and she had changed her own locks last year after a break-in, and she told me who to call. And she also told me in this very calm tone that she had seen Roxanne and Tessa loading boxes into their car earlier, and she had assumed they were helping, but she said it looked like they were picking specific items, not just clearing clutter. Hearing someone else say, it made it real in a way my own brain was trying to avoid. The locksmith came that afternoon, and Roxanne saw the van outside and started yelling. She said I was making a scene, and she said I was disrespecting my mom's memory, and she said my mom would be ashamed, and that line was meant to land like a punch, but it actually did the opposite, because my mom would have been furious watching them take her things while calling me unstable. Galen tried to block the locksmith from the door, and I handed the locksmith the paperwork that showed I had authority to secure the property as executor, and the locksmith looked exhausted like he had done this job in the middle of family fights before, and he just nodded and started working. Roxanne said I was choosing possessions over people, and I told her she was choosing possessions too. She was just mad I noticed. They finally left, but not before Roxanne told me I was going to regret how I handled this, and not before Galen said, in that mild voice, that I was making enemies for no reason. After they were gone, I sat in my mom's kitchen and stared at the bare spot on the counter where her ceramic cookie jar used to be, not because I cared about a jar, but because it felt like proof that someone had walked into her house and erased parts of her on purpose. That night I went back with a notebook, and I started writing down everything I could remember, what was usually on which shelf, what was in which drawer, what my mom had told me about certain items, and I kept stopping because my brain would get stuck on these tiny sensory memories, her hands folding towels, her laugh when she watched game shows, the way she said my name when she was annoyed, but trying not to be. The next day I went to Galen Place. He moved into an apartment across town after my mom got sick. He said it was easier for commuting, and I did not go there to confront him. I did not knock. I did not do a doorstep scene. I just parked across the street and watched, because I needed to know if my mom's things were there. And after a while, I saw him carry a box inside, and the box had my mom's handwriting on it, the kind she used on storage labels. My stomach turned over, and I realized I was not dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with a coordinated grab, and they were all counting on me being too tired and sad to fight back. I went home and called Roxanne, and I told her I wanted the jewelry box returned and every photo album returned by the end of the week. And I told her I had changed the locks and I had documented missing property. And her voice went sharp. She said, "You are threatening family." And she said, "You are acting like your mom left you a fortune." And she said, "It is just sentimental junk." And she said, "You should focus on healing instead of obsessing." Then she slipped and said, "You always got everything from her anyway." That sentence made the whole picture click, because it was not about grief. It was resentment, and now my mom was not here to say no, so they were saying yes to themselves. 2 days later, I was in my mom's garage looking for the spare key to her lockbox because I needed her documents, and I found something else instead, a slim, hard plastic case behind a stack of paint trays, and inside it was a little handheld camcorder, the kind my mom used for family holidays years ago before phones did everything. There was a sticky note on it in her handwriting that said for Drew, "If things get weird." I stood there holding it like it was hot, and my throat tightened because my mom knew. She knew that the second she was gone, people would start taking, and she made a plan not for money, but for truth. I took it inside, charged it, and watched the last video on it, and it was my mom sitting at her kitchen table, hair pulled back, face tired but her eyes clear, and she said, "If you are watching this, then I am not here, and I am sorry." And she said, "Galen and Roxanne have been asking about my things, and she said they have already tried to take items while I was in the hospital, and she said she told them no, and she said she wrote an inventory of the personal items that matter most to her, and she said it is in the back of the recipe binder, under the divider that says soups." Then she said something that made my chest ache in a totally different way. She said, "Do not let anyone tell you you are selfish for wanting to keep pieces of me. Selfish is taking from a grieving person and calling it love." I went to the kitchen shelf and pulled down her recipe binder, and my hands were shaking so hard I had to set it on the table and breathe. And when I flipped to the soups divider, there was a folded sheet tucked behind it, and it was an inventory in her handwriting, not just vague, detailed. She had written descriptions, distinguishing marks, even photos printed and stapled in the corner for some items. And right at the top of the list was the jewelry box, described perfectly, including the little chip on the back corner from when I dropped it as a kid and cried, because I thought I broke something precious. Under that were the photo albums, the wooden postcard box, the camcorder itself, and a set of hand-stitched quilts she made. And at the bottom she wrote, "If anyone tries to claim these were promised, they were not." I sat there staring at the paper, and for the first time since she died, I felt something other than fog. I felt focus. I did not call Roxanne right away. I did not send warnings. I did not make threats, because I knew how they worked. They would stall, they would deny, they would create a new story, and I would be back in the same loop, me asking for decency, them acting like I am unreasonable. Instead, I did the one thing they never expected from me, because I am usually the person who tries to keep peace. I built a case like my mom was still here, and I was speaking for her. I took photos of every empty shelf, every drawer, every missing spot. I printed my mom's inventory sheet. I made copies of the executor paperwork, and I went to a local consignment auction house that specializes in estate items, not because I thought my family would be that obvious, but because Roxanne has a habit of turning anything into money the moment she can. And when I walked in and asked the front desk what their intake process was, the woman at the counter told me they log consignor IDs, and they photograph items at drop-off, and they hold certain categories for verification if there is any dispute. I asked her very calmly, "What happens if stolen estate property is consigned?" And she looked at me for a long second. Then she said, "If you have documentation, bring it, and we can flag items." And she said people think they can just walk in with whatever, but paper matters. Paper matters. My mom would have liked that. I went home and I waited, because I had a feeling Roxanne was not going to keep sentimental junk in her living room. She was going to turn it into something she could hold in her hand, and if she did that, it would leave a trail. Update, 2 weeks later. I did not have to wait long. A little under 2 weeks after the lock change, I got a call from the auction house front desk. She asked if I was still trying to flag missing estate items, and she said they had just received a drop-off that raised concerns. She did not say the name on the phone. She just asked me to come in with my documentation. I drove there with my mom's inventory sheet in a folder like I was going to a job interview, and the whole drive my brain kept flipping between anger and this hollow sadness. Because even with a plan, it still felt unreal that I was about to chase my mom's life through a business intake log. When I got there, the front desk woman walked me to a back room where they store items before photographing them, and she opened a rolling cage door, and right there on a metal shelf was my mom's wooden postcard box. I recognized it instantly because the latch was slightly crooked, and next to it was the ceramic bird that used to sit by her window, and there was a quilt folded in a clear plastic bag with a masking tape label on it. I felt my throat close up, because seeing those items under fluorescent lights, sitting like merchandise, felt like someone had put my mom's voice on mute. The staff member told me the consignor was listed as Roxanne Harlan, my aunt's full name, and she said Roxanne had claimed the items were from her own storage, and she had acted annoyed when asked basic questions, and she had rushed through paperwork like she wanted to get out. The staff member asked if I could confirm ownership, and I handed her the inventory sheet and pointed to the postcard box description, and the photo my mom had stapled to the corner matched, same crooked latch, same dark scratch along the side, and the staff member nodded and said, "Okay, we are not releasing these items," and she said they can be held pending a police report or a written dispute resolution, and she said their policy is not to get dragged into family battles, but they also do not want stolen goods on their floor. I asked if the jewelry box was among the items, and she said not yet, but she said Roxanne mentioned she would bring more next week, and she said she had also asked whether jewelry sells better as a set or individual pieces, like she was shopping for profit margins. I left the auction house shaking, but not in a powerless way, in a locked-in way, like my body finally had one job: protect the things my mom wanted protected. I called Roxanne from my car, not to argue, but to tell her one sentence: "I know you consigned mom's things. I have documentation. Return everything by the end of the week." Roxanne did not even pretend confusion. She went straight into offense. She said, "You are stalking me," and she said, "You are making your mother's death into a legal circus." And she said the items were family items, and she said Alina would not want you acting like this, and she said the auction house probably misunderstood, because she never said they were stolen. I told her I had my mom's inventory in her handwriting, and I told her my mom recorded a video about this, and there was this long silence, and then Roxanne said, "You are really going to do that? You are going to weaponize her last words." Weaponize, like my mom truth was a weapon against her, like the only way Roxanne knows how to exist is if nobody calls her on what she is doing. I told her she has until the end of the week. Then I hung up, and that was the first time in my life I hung up on my aunt, and it felt like slamming a door that should have been shut years ago. That night, Galen called me, which he almost never did unless he needed something, and he started out calm. He said he heard there was tension. He said he wants to keep things respectful, and he said Roxanne is just emotional, and he said she is grieving too. I asked him where my mom's jewelry box is, and he said he does not have it. And I asked him where the photo albums are, and he said he does not know. And I asked him why my mom's notebook is missing, and he said he never saw a notebook. Then he made a mistake. He said, "You need to stop digging around, because you might find things you do not understand." That sentence made my stomach drop, because it sounded like a threat dressed up as concern. I asked him what he meant, and he went quiet. Then he said, "Nothing, I just mean the house has memories, and grief makes people imagine conspiracies." I told him my mom's video exists, and I told him she said he tried to take items while she was in the hospital, and Galen's voice changed. It got tighter, and he said, "Alina was confused at the end, and he said you should not trust everything she wrote down." That was when the grief fog cleared enough for anger to take its place, because he was trying to rewrite my mom's mind to excuse his behavior, and I told him to return anything he took, and I told him he is not welcome in the house, and he started to argue that he is the surviving spouse and he has rights, and he kept repeating rights like it was a spell. I stopped the call, not dramatically, I just ended it, because there is no winning a conversation with someone who treats words like a tool to pry open doors. The next day I went back to my mom's house, and I checked the basement storage area, and I noticed something small that made everything bigger. One of the plastic bins had been swapped, not moved, swapped, because my mom labeled her bins in thick marker, and the label on this one was in different handwriting, thinner, more careful, and it said holiday linens. Inside were old towels and random fabric that did not belong to my mom, and it was so obvious that whoever did it thought I would not notice, like they assumed I was too wrecked to pay attention. I pulled down the bin that was supposed to be holiday linens, and it was empty, and suddenly that comment from Galen about finding things I do not understand made sense, because they were not just grabbing valuables, they were hiding the act by replacing containers to make the house look intact. I called the non-emergency police line and asked what the process is for reporting theft from an estate property, and the dispatcher sounded bored at first. Then I explained I am the executor, and the property was secured, and family removed items without authorization, and she told me to come in and make a report with documentation. I brought the inventory sheet, copies of the executor paperwork, and the photos from the auction house back room. The staff printed them for me, and the officer I spoke with was blunt. He said family theft can get messy because people call it a civil dispute, but he also said documentation and third-party verification matter. And he took the report and gave me a case number, and he said if the auction house is holding items and the consignor is known, that creates a path. I did not feel good doing it. I felt like I was doing something my family would gossip about forever. But then I pictured my mom's quilts on a shelf with a price tag, and I kept going. 2 days after the report, Roxanne showed up at my work building, not inside, but she waited near the entrance at the spot where people step outside to take calls, and it was weirdly calculated, because she knew I would be less likely to raise my voice in public. She started crying the moment she saw me, and it was such a fast switch that it felt like a performance. She said she cannot believe I called the police on her. She said she loved my mother. She said she has been nothing but supportive, and she said I am humiliating her. I told her to return the items. That is it. And she snapped out of tears and said, "You do not get to punish me for wanting something to remember her by." I told her she already has memories. She is trying to take objects, and she called me selfish again, and she said I am hoarding, and she said my mom would want her sister to have something special. I told her my mom wrote down exactly what she wanted protected, and I told her she can ask me later for something appropriate through proper channels, and Roxanne's face twisted, and she said, "You think you are some hero because you found a list. You think you are better than us because you are the executor, but you are just a lonely kid who cannot share." That was when I realized she was not actually grieving my mom. She was grieving access to my mom's things, access to control, and now that door was closing and she was furious. I told her the auction house has her name on intake paperwork, and I told her I have photos, and I told her the police report exists, and I told her she can either return everything quietly or she can do it with an officer watching, and she stared at me like she had never seen me before. She said, "Fine," and she said she would bring things back. But she said she would never forgive me for this, and I told her she does not have to forgive me, she just has to stop. That weekend she returned some items, not all. She dropped off 2 quilts and the ceramic bird in a cardboard box like it was trash, and she did not ring the bell. She left it on the porch and drove off, and when I opened it the quilt smelled like a different house, like laundry detergent that was not my mom's, and it made my eyes burn. The postcard box was still at the auction house, and the photo albums were still missing, and the jewelry box was still missing, and Galen was silent, which meant he was planning something, because Galen is never silent unless he thinks time will help him. I went back to the camcorder and watched more of my mom's saved clips, not for comfort, but to see if she mentioned where she kept the albums, and I found a short clip where she was filming the living room during a holiday. And in the background, I could see the albums stacked on a shelf inside the hallway closet, and I remembered she moved them there after a leak in the basement, and that made me realize something. They did not just take whatever was visible, they knew where things were, which meant someone had been watching my mom organize her life for years, waiting to pick it apart. Final update, 4 months later. Everything ended because Roxanne got greedy, and because she underestimated how much evidence a normal business collects when someone tries to sell family history for cash. A few months after the first auction house call, the detective handling my report contacted me and asked if I could come in. And when I got there, he told me Roxanne had been flagged again, not because she confessed, but because she attempted to consign a set of items with engraving that matched a missing description from my mom's inventory. And the auction house intake photos, plus my documentation, created probable cause for a recovery request. The items were my mom's jewelry box contents, not everything, but enough to make my stomach drop. A charm bracelet with initials, a ring my mom wore every day, and a locket that held a tiny photo of me. And the detective told me the auction house had placed everything on hold the moment the intake photos hit their system, because they had already marked Roxanne as a disputed consignor. The detective asked if I wanted to pursue charges, and he warned me that family cases can drag. But he also said forging ownership through consignment paperwork and removing items from an estate property is not a misunderstanding, and he said the paper trail is strong. I told him yes, because at that point it was not even about objects. It was about stopping them from treating my mom's life like a buffet. Roxanne got interviewed, and she tried to shift blame to Galen immediately. She claimed Galen told her she could take items because he was the spouse. She claimed he said the will was unfair. She claimed he said I would never notice. And the detective told me later that Roxanne's story kept changing depending on which detail she was confronted with. Galen got interviewed too, and he tried his usual soft confusion. He claimed he did not know what Roxanne did. He claimed he only wanted to reduce my stress. He claimed he was packing to help. And then the detective showed him a photo from Roxanne intake paperwork, where Galen is visible in the background reflection, holding my mom's photo albums in his arms. That was the part nobody expected, including me, because it meant Roxanne and Galen did not just collude. They documented themselves by accident in a place that uses cameras and mirrors and routine processes, and Galen could not talk his way out of a reflection. The albums were recovered from Galen apartment, and when the detective returned them to me, the corners were bent like they had been shoved into a closet, and there were sticky notes inside marking which pages had valuable old prints, like someone was planning to remove specific photos later. I did not cry when I saw the albums, which surprised me. I just felt this heavy anger settle into something colder, because I realized they were not even sentimental about her. They were strategic. Roxanne ended up taking a plea deal for theft-related charges tied to the consignment attempt. Not a dramatic courtroom circus, just paperwork and consequences. She was required to return what she still had. She was barred from entering my mom's property, and she got probation with restitution, and she lost her job at her small office because her employer did not want the association. Galen tried to fight longer, but the estate attorney handling probate for the court, not hired by me personally, notified him that his behavior would be used to challenge any claims he made for additional property distribution, and Galen folded the way he always does when someone with authority stops treating him like a harmless older guy. He signed an agreement to relinquish any claim to the personal items specified in my mom's inventory, and he moved out of state shortly after. No goodbye, no speech, just gone. The auction house returned the postcard box and everything Roxanne had dropped off, and the staff member who first helped me said something simple when she handed it over. She said, "People always think family means trust, but paper is what keeps you safe." The estate process itself finished slowly, because it always does, but the part that mattered to me finished in a single afternoon. I brought everything back into my mom's sunroom. I laid the quilts across the old couch. I stacked the albums on the shelf where they belonged. I put the jewelry box back in the top drawer, and I locked it, not because I think a lock is magic, but because the act of locking it felt like drawing a line. Roxanne has not spoken to me since. Tessa tried once through a mutual friend. She wanted me to admit I went too far, and I did not respond, because there is nothing to negotiate when someone steals from a dead woman and calls it love. Last night, I carried the camcorder into my own house, set it on the mantel, and shut the drawer with the jewelry box inside. Then I turned the key and listened to the lock catch.